Are you frustrated because every time you try to talk with your spouse about problems, your spouse is avoidant or argumentative? Want a way to talk about problems without conflict while fixing problems and getting closer? You can have that. It starts right now. When we have a problem, we naturally want to solve it directly. Walking up to your spouse, stating the problem, how it makes you feel, and what you want is very clear communication. I feel frustrated when you don't spend time with me, and I want you to spend more time with me in the evenings. This is often how counselors teach people to communicate. It works well if your spouse is empathetic and motivated to improve your relationship. If you have such a spouse, I encourage you to use this way and respond with your spouse's love language. If you are unsure of your spouse's love language, you can take the love language quiz on my website in the Learning Center. Unfortunately, the direct approach is limited in strained relationships. It often causes defensiveness and frustration. Do it repeatedly and it can lead to a pattern of conflict, followed by avoidance, followed by a breakdown in all communication. Clearly, a different approach is needed, and fortunately, there is one. Let me share with you some of the key principles for effectively talking about problems with your husband or wife. These are some of the same principles my clients use to restore badly damaged marriages. I think you'll find that they feel good and bring you more hope rather than more stress. Let's apply specific principles to a sample problem issue. Here is the example problem. Suppose that you try to keep your evenings free to spend with your spouse. However, every evening your spouse is using his or her cell phone for, quote, important business. You have tried bringing this up before, but your spouse becomes defensive, reluctantly shuts off the phone, and you have a bad night. Now you are stuck in a no-win situation. This is a fixable situation, but it won't get better by just doing a repeat of what you tried before. No matter what kind of problem you are having with your spouse, talking about it is not your first step, and starting with talking about problems is why many people get stuck. That's because they are missing an important prior step, and that is to make sure other aspects of your relationship are going well. Trying to talk with your spouse in an emotionally distant relationship is very different from talking with your spouse in an emotionally close relationship. Now, I understand that you would be closer if your spouse wasn't doing the problem behavior, but you will get stuck if you start there. Your starting point for working on conflict areas is to make sure that you are not introducing any. It's easy to get lazy or forgetful about some important areas that we need to continuously work on to maintain a good marriage. No one's perfect, but working on any particularly weak areas before talking about problems can make things go much better. It helps to prevent getting a finger pointed back at you. Here are some self-help questions to start with. How are you at 1. Consistently appearing happy to see or talk with your spouse? 2. Making your spouse feel like a priority? 3. Showing interest in your spouse and being a good validator? 4. Not using any needy behaviors such as arguing, complaining, or criticizing? 5. Developing common interest on your own apart from business or kids? 6. Doing what you can to remain physically attractive, youthful, and energetic? 7. Having activities and friends of your own? And 8. Using good boundaries that keep your spouse's respect? Do you feel like you are doing pretty well in each of those areas? If not, then work on them until you are before talking to your spouse about problems. It will make a really big difference. A resource such as my books Overcome Neediness and Get the Love You Want or Connecting Through Yes will help you to improve in these areas. The stronger you are in these areas, the better position you will be in for making positive requests, discussing problems, and using boundaries if you have to. Not only that, but you will feel good about yourself. You will feel secure and stronger. The first principle that will help you to talk about problems is to first consider how the problem makes things worse for your spouse, even if he or she doesn't realize it. For our cell phone example, you have a problem in that you want your spouse to spend time with you in the evening, and he or she isn't doing that. You need to ask yourself how this is also a problem for your spouse. What is he or she missing out on? What will happen to your spouse if this problem continues? Those are your two key questions to ask before you talk about problems. What is he or she missing out on? And what will happen to your spouse if this problem continues? If your spouse won't miss out on anything, it's easy to see why he or she would rather be doing something else. The same considerations would go for other problems like overspending, not doing enough chores, or being too sexually unresponsive or aggressive. Each behavior will result in your spouse missing out on something. Sometimes this means that you need to sharpen your skills. If your spouse got off the phone and all you had to offer was watching TV together, your spouse isn't going to miss out on much. Consider how you can make your spouse's changed behavior pay off for him or her. You're not bribing your spouse to change, you are preparing to give him or her a good experience to help sustain the change. Another important principle for reducing conflict is to have realistic expectations. Although it's a hard lesson to learn, your spouse won't naturally want to give up personal pleasures to do things for you or with you. You can wish for it, you can hope for it, but in the end, you have to deal with it. Marriages, like friendships, have to be mutually satisfying to be mutually motivating. Making your relationship good for your spouse isn't about manipulation. It's about being the kind of person that he or she is naturally drawn to. You'll still need boundaries, but not very often. You may need to stop here and work on these things. There's nothing wrong with that. Bookmark this and come back when you are ready to continue on to talking about the marriage problem, whatever it is. There's a lot of material on my website to help with this, or we can work together in coaching. Are you ready for more? Okay, let's get into more principles for talking about problems without creating conflict and while remaining emotionally connected. Another important principle is that you must carefully choose when to talk about a problem. The worst time to talk about a problem is when it is happening. The best time to talk about a problem is when you and your spouse are relaxed. This means when things are going well and the problem has not occurred recently. If you want to talk with your spouse about spending time together in the evenings, then talk about it sometime during the day. Maybe on the weekend when you're having coffee or going for a walk together. Don't be afraid of messing up a good moment because you're going to talk about things in a way that keeps your good moment good. An important principle for couples with a history of conflict or avoidance is to expect it to continue as you gradually make changes. No matter how naturally you bring up problems, they may cause defensiveness. This is usually because it provokes feelings of being inadequate, blamed, or controlled. Although you're going to tell your spouse how much you enjoy spending time together or other validating comments, your spouse may still become reactive due to his or her previous experiences with you. He or she might start right away saying how the cell phone use is important, even though you didn't even mention that yet. If so, your spouse needs help not feeling attacked or controlled. All you need to do is to validate without pushing your agenda. Perhaps you say, I really look forward to spending time with you in the evening sometimes. I think once in a while we could do some things in the evening that you would really enjoy. Now, I would consider that an excellent way to approach it, making it a win for your spouse and a small change rather than a radical one. But your spouse may be sensitized and say something like, here we go again. I told you I have to spend time on my cell phone, yada, yada, yada. All you need to do is to validate that with something like, I know you do. Just like me, you can't get everything done in the day, and so the night is the only chance you get. You might feel like you are working against yourself here, but actually you are creating emotional connection. and that will make it easier to eventually get more of what you want. Helping a sensitized spouse relax with you is an important step before talking together about making positive changes. It's a step many people miss. Another principle is to make a less direct approach. Many people, in their effort to solve problems, skip validation and jump directly into the problem. A better approach is to validate our spouse in the area that the problem involves. If it is spending time together, validate how much you like spending time with your spouse. If it's money, validate how hard your spouse works, or the wise purchases your spouse has made, or how he or she makes your lives more enjoyable with his or her purchases. When you see your spouse's face and eyes light up with your validation, you will know you are doing a good job. And it's a good indicator that you and your spouse are becoming closer. Another principle is to keep things natural. Talking about a problem should fit naturally into the flow of your conversation. Many women have a habit of saying, "I want to talk to you about something." This sends chills down a man's spine and gets the adrenaline flowing before you ever talk about the subject. Some men also do this, though men are more prone to jumping into the problem out of nowhere. If you want to talk about spending more time together, first make the time you already spend together better. Say how much you like it. Suggest something you two might do together that fits his or her interest at the time you want. Back off smoothly if your spouse doesn't show interest. Sometimes fish need to consider the bait before they will bite. Change the subject and end on a good note, just like you started. Don't say things like, "Thank you for talking with me," which makes it unnatural, as if your spouse is providing a service. Just give a kiss or whatever and go about your business. Natural feeling interactions build closeness in a way that structured talks don't. This is the approach I emphasize in my coaching. It's kind of a get back to be a girlfriend or boyfriend style. Another important principle for talking about problems is to talk about only one at a time. Dealing with one problem introduces stress. Dealing with two introduces even more. Some people could greatly improve their communication just by following this principle. If you had a good little chat about spending time together in the evening once in a while to do something your spouse enjoys, don't start talking about your need for more help with the kids. Save that for some other time, after your evenings are going better. It may seem like it will take much longer to fix problems this way, but because your fixes will be more effective, relationship improvement will happen more quickly. Your enthusiasm for your relationship will grow, and so will your spouse's. In your attempt to talk about a problem, your spouse may bring up a different problem. That's okay. A good principle to follow is to be flexible. If your spouse brings up a problem or concern, validate your spouse's concern and make working on your spouse's concern a good experience. Save your problem for a different time. If you do things this way, your spouse will be much more open to working on problems with you, and you will still get to your problem before long. Don't get so focused on finding a solution to your problem that you can't switch to your spouse's agenda. Doing so will actually help you to get your problem fixed. There are times you just can't wait to address a problem. If you have a problem that has to be addressed right away, then you need to think about using a boundary rather than a problem-solving discussion. Boundaries are never discussions. Your next principle is to make sure you have a method for solving problems, whether you're working on them with your spouse or on your own. No amount of talking will solve a problem if you don't have a method for solving problems. Instead, you'll just end up having the same discussion over and over, and that will make your marriage worse. Your problem-solving steps might be something like this. 1. You find something you and your spouse would both like to happen, the win-win. Step 2. You brainstorm ideas to make that happen. Step 3. You consider the pros and cons of those ideas, making sure to add cons for your own ideas. Step 4, choose one idea together that will be your plan A. And step 5, choose a backup idea to use as a plan B in case plan A doesn't go well. So, you two might decide to take a night during the month in which you will both go out to a movie that your spouse gets to choose. And your plan B could be you're going out to see a movie with a friend instead of with your spouse. A good connection, having friends you do things with, and spending less time with your spouse than he or she would want will all create more desire in your spouse to do things with you. That's what would make this plan B good for this example. Just like with your friends, being enjoyable but not being together too often is going to keep your spouse wanting to get together with you over and over. And don't forget to use the power of prayer. God wants us to have a loving relationship with our spouse. That's very important to him, and it's why he commands us in the Bible to love our spouse. Taking time to pray before talking with our spouse about a problem can help us to have a good mindset and to come across in a loving way. In our prayer, we can affirm our love for our spouse and express our thankfulness for the blessings our spouse has brought into our life. A loving mindset is a secure one that will help us to succeed where anger never will. If you've lost that loving feeling, see my post on how to revive your love for your spouse. Let me summarize by saying that talking about problems is rarely as easy as sharing your thoughts, feelings, and desires. That helps to improve understanding, but often falls short of creating change. Helping our spouse to make changes starts with us making any needed changes in ourselves. After that, we can consider how relationship problems affect both our spouse and us. We are then ready to talk about the problem when things are relaxed, being sure not to present more than one idea for change at a time. We don't expect our spouse to have all the answers and instead use a problem-solving process to arrive at a solution. And that solution will just be an experiment. We choose a second option to try in case the first one doesn't work out. Small changes that are done as a trial get less resistance. By having a life of our own and avoiding excess togetherness with our spouse, we help to keep our spouse's desire to cooperate and spend quality time with us. And if our spouse is doing something really damaging that he or she is not likely to stop, we need to use boundaries rather than discussions to stop that behavior. Even so, we do it for their sake as well as our own. We can depend on God to help us create a loving marriage when we are loving and bring our concerns to Him. Making the changes I've talked about will take your talk about problems from a negative one to a positive one, instilling more hope and closeness for you and your spouse. Depending on how many changes you need to make and what your relationship is like now, getting help could be an important next step. If you want step-by-step help using this exact method with your spouse, I can help you apply it to your situation so you can bring up problems without starting a fight and so you can start getting real cooperation. Access details about the Difficult Spouse Coaching Package at coachjackito.com. The link is also in the description. If you are having conflict and problems are going unresolved, then start using at least one of the ideas I talked about today. To have more success always requires doing something different from what we have been doing. Even small changes can make a big difference.